Okay, it says I'm live.
Okay, we're live.
Can you guys see us live?
Excuse me, of course.
Okay, so I've muted you guys.
All right, Sanjay, I think we're live.
Okay. Okay. How do we tell if anybody's out there?
Well, why don't we ask them?
Hey, is there anybody out there? I'm Sanjay. This is my friend Neeraj.
Hey,
Type something in chat. In fact, type in your name and where you're logging in from. Oh, there we go. Corey. Hey, buddy. Okay, so we're gonna take a few minutes to let people log in, and then while you're logging in, just put in your name and where you're from, and then we'll get ready to go. Okay. All right, here we go.
Look at all these people.
Look at all these people. This is great. Okay. So while people are logging in, we drew two winners for the 30-minute one-on-one chat with me, and their names are Nalini and Jathu, and my assistant Christine is going to be reaching out to you directly to schedule one-on-one time. So I'll do a quick introduction. We can probably do this again later as well. So I'm Sanjay. You guys know me. My life is lived in public. This is my best friend Neeraj, and we have similar backgrounds. We're both brown guys with MBAs and engineering degrees, and we've started companies, and we talk about business and stuff all the time. So he is the perfect person to be asking me questions about risk, and he's going to be asking me your questions about risk. And the process we're going to do is run, I think, about 45 minutes of you asking questions from other people, and then we're going to open it up for you guys to ask questions live in the chat, and we'll read those out live, and we'll wrap it up.
Perfect. All right, Sanjay. So this is pretty cool. I mean, you got a lot of questions. There's a lot of people that want to know what you think about risk, and I think you're actually a really good person to talk about risk. The first time we met, I don't know how long ago that was, a couple of decades, a bit more. I remember thinking to myself that this guy will either be broke or very, very wealthy. And I'm really happy to see it turned out the way that I was hoping.
Right.
But you struck me as someone who took a lot of risk. And so there's a lot of people out there who are, looking at making really big changes in their lives, whether it's, starting a new company, changing careers, maybe changing something else big in their lives. And so let's answer some of their questions.
Yes, let's do it. Okay.
All right. So James from Florida wants to know, how do you know if your dream is too big, too risky, or too impractical to try?
Neeraj, no dream is too big or too risky. No, that's bullshit. There's lots of dreams that are really ill-conceived and impractical. What I'd say is that the best thing to do is talk to lots of people to get a sense of how practical something is, especially how expensive it's going to be. And there's tools you can use. I mean, nowadays, everybody has ChatGPT, right? But I had an idea once for a universal surveillance system 20 years ago, and I knew it was going to take at least $10 million to get it off the ground. And I didn't know people. And I talked to a couple of VCs, and they just said it's impractical. And so that died very quickly. It was too much. I would say talk to people. Don't worry about people stealing your ideas. And above all, do not ask somebody to sign a non-disclosure before talking to them. It's a sign of amateurism. And any professional investor like Neeraj or myself is going to take that as a signal to just to walk away. Look, we're too busy to steal your ideas. So yeah, just openly talk. Don't disclose anything that you think might be a trade secret, and just kind of gauge what other people are telling you, right? And what you want, by the way, you don't want everybody to agree it's a great idea, because that means it's been done. You don't want everybody to disagree. That means it's probably a dumb idea. What you want is some people who say, oh, that's too risky, or oh, that's too ambitious, while other people say, wow, it'd be really cool to have that product.
Yeah, I think, one thing that I think maybe is implied here is think about who you're asking.
Okay.
Right? Because depending on the question.
Yeah, can I just say on that? It's like, it's really difficult for me to arrange time with people one-on-one. But if somebody asks me a question on Instagram or LinkedIn, or even sending me an email to my Sanjay Says email and says, what do you think of this idea? I'll happily respond to that. I mean, that's what venture capitalists do all day, every day, is just responding to people, telling them what they think of their ideas.
Perfect, great. So actually, I want to talk about an article you had written about asymmetric risk, because I think that kind of applies here. Maybe do you want to just expand on that a little bit, and we can drop a link?
Sure. So, I mean, what the idea of asymmetric risk is, there are lots of risks, the ones we're all familiar with. You roll a die, and the odds of it coming up 1 is 1 in 6. That's symmetric risk, right? And people will generally pay you $6 if you roll a 1, if you bet $1 on it. But asymmetric risk are things where the amount you can lose is limited on the downside, but the amount you can gain is unlimited on the upside. So things like meeting somebody new or moving to a new city are things that have limited downside risk, massive potential upside risk. And what you want to look for is opportunities like that. And this is why, for example, investing in the stock market is generally a bad idea for people, individual stocks, because the downside risk,
stocks, right?
individual stocks, the downside risk and the upside risk are almost perfectly matched, because everybody has the same information. But if you've got an opportunity where, hey, and this is the kind of investment I make, I'll invest 100,000 in something, and there's a potential that turns into several million, but I can only lose 100,000, right? And there are some investments, unfortunately, like starting a business, where zero is not the limit. You can zoom right past zero into massive debt and have to declare bankruptcy, which is something that happened to me. But just be aware of don't think here's all the ways that things could go positive. Think about the worst case is actually where you owe people money, not where you just lose the money that you put in.
Yeah, actually, asymmetric risk is a really important concept. I talk to my kids about this, not in terms of money, but in terms of, talk to that girl. Yeah, you may crash and burn, but you may meet someone really important in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so Myra from California wants to know, how much information do I gather before making a big decision? And how do I know I have enough facts?
Well, you're never going to have enough facts. You're never going to have all the information you need. But what I've said to people before is, when you're coming up with an idea, typically in any business plan, there's a list of things that you don't know the answers to, right? So for my audiobook business, I didn't know how many books people would listen to a month. I didn't know how many people would subscribe per day. I didn't know how long it would take for packages to be delivered, or how long it would take for a download to get downloaded. And so I wrote down all the variables that I thought were important, that when you multiply them together will result in some kind of a revenue and profit and loss statement. And then you just individually pick at each one of those. And there's so many different ways to get information. You can talk to people. You can run a survey online in Google. You can put up a fake web page and actually take people's orders, which is something we did with audiobooks as well. And then we apologized and we created the actual product, because when we took those orders, we didn't have a product to sell. So then you just collect as much information as you can. And then sooner or later, you're going to encounter a variable that you just don't know the answer to. And that's where risk comes in. That's when you say, all right, I've talked to people. I think there's an idea here. I believe that this is going to work. And that's really, really important. You got to believe that it's going to work. And then get out there and try.
Yeah, and I think it's important to gather facts, but you have to stop at some point, right? Otherwise, you get the paralysis analysis.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any kind of rule of thumb for when to stop?
Well, I mean, I'm headstrong, you know this, right? And so it's like, I just want to go, I want to go. And if anything, people have to hold me back to say, hey, shouldn't we collect a little bit more information? So I've got the opposite problem of wanting to go in too fast. So what I would say, maybe the best thing to do is surround yourself with a variety of really good people, people who've done what you want to do, ideally. But typically if you're younger or just starting out, you may not know that many experienced people. What I would say is have some pessimists, have some optimists around you, so you actually get the breadth of opinion, and make sure that especially the people you disagree with, those are the people you need to listen to the most. There's always a grain of truth in what they're saying, right? So if they're saying, hey, my business school professor with my very first entrepreneurship idea of delivering videos to people's homes, he said, 7 people have tried this before and they all failed. Can you explain why? And my dumbass answer was, I'm smarter than they were, and that's why I'm going to succeed. If I had done the proper analysis, I would have realized that it was a marketing problem and there was no efficient way of telling people that the product existed. And I got to say, by the way, that's the number one problem you're going to encounter. I mean, there's cash flow, there's all kinds of problems, but if you have a product, the world will never beat a path to your doorstep. Okay, doesn't matter how good the product is. You have to find a way to tell people about it cost effectively, and that is one of the biggest challenges in any business.
Yeah, I mean, okay. Sorry, I had a question, but now I've forgotten it. Anyway, let's go on to the next question here. Okay, well, when we, again, going back to when we first met, you had at that time just, let's just say, closed your last business and were in the midst of reinventing yourself. So, you're a self-made man.
Are you talking about my poker career? Is that the?
Yeah, right. That was around the time.
Okay,
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
I think that's when we met. So you've taken a lot of risks to actually arrive at this place, right? So let's talk a little more about risk taking in business. So a lot of people get stuck at the idea stage. And so this is, I guess, coming back, maybe a similar theme, right? So you have an idea. How do you know it's worth acting upon?
I mean, okay, so there's a few ways to look at this, right? Is the idea big enough, right? Is there a market for it? Is it easy enough to make the product, right? And so I think on all of these subjects, on all these questions, you have to get out there and get answers to the questions. In terms of making a product, one thing that internet tools and software in general let you do now that wasn't possible when I started out, you can prototype anything really, really quickly. So what I would say is figure out some version of the product that either looks like the product you want or operates like the product you want, create it using prototyping tools. And if you don't know how to do that, then you should go to a website like Upwork and go hire a freelancer who can build something for you. And get something that, like on an iPad or on an iPhone, that you can show somebody and say, look, here's what the screens are going to look like. What do you think? Would you use something like this? So I had a product, I guess it was about 12 years ago, called Bello. And the idea was, yeah, it was a great product. It was a great product, right? But the idea was you would record, I would want to send a string of videos from friends to somebody for their birthday, to you for your birthday. So I'd send out a notice to 50 people and it would say to everybody, hey, record a little 8-second video. We're going to stitch them together and send it to New York for his birthday, right? So it seems straightforward. It failed on the pillar of not having an efficient, effective way to tell people about it. We thought that as people created these videos, that would tell them about the service. And then they think, oh, I would love to get something like this or send something like this. We'll send it out. That didn't work. We thought for every 50 videos that were created, one new creator.
Reasonable assumption.
Right? Reasonable assumption. It's completely wrong. The ratio was like 1 in 200. And so it failed on that. But what we did is we answered all the questions we could answer, which is we created a prototype, a visual. We manually stitched together videos and sent them out to people. Had an idea of all the key variables, but at the end of the day, we simply could not answer the question of how many people are going to sign up for the service based on having participated in the service. Had to launch the product, right? I think I lost $250,000 on that one because I believed in it. You know how into that product I was, right? But eventually I came to the conclusion that we just didn't have, among the group of us, we didn't have the skill set necessary, especially on the marketing side, to make that work. And so I had to pull the plug, which is another question I know that's on this list of how do you know?
We're definitely going to talk about
that. Okay, yeah, we'll
actually, so on that one, a little while later, there was a company that came out, Kudo Board, which did the exact same thing, and it also died, which I just thought was kind of interesting, right?
There have been a few companies that have done that, right?
So it was an idea that seemed so promising, and you could ask a lot of people about it, and everyone loves it. But somehow the business model didn't work. And
no. And I think, sometimes it's just the timing that's wrong. Because if you look now at the creator industry, right? As we went from Vine, which I think got acquired by Twitter, and then into Instagram and a little bit of video creation, then into TikTok, where now it feels like every fourth person is creating videos, right? That product might succeed now. I don't know. But it'd be worth a shot now because people are much more comfortable recording themselves on video and comfortable with the tools for doing that.
So actually, I'm going to rewind a little bit, because one of the things that I don't think we've addressed again explicitly, everything you've been describing, right? I think a lot of times when people think about taking risk, it's like, playing poker all in, right? Like that's the risk. Oh, I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to mortgage my house, and I'm going to sell my car, and I'm going to just put it all in. I think that's how people think about risk. But what you've been talking about is ask the questions, find out the answers to your questions, build a prototype. So you actually take a pretty, engineered approach to risk. Mm-hmm. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Well, I mean, I believe in minimizing risk, right? I mean, there's so many beautiful little nuggets of information or wisdom inside the area of risk. Certainly one of them is as you figure out there's never just one risk, right? There's all these different risks in a business. So you try and figure out what the answers are in each area to minimize the amount of uncertainty in that area. So for example, around the time I got into venture capital, software was starting to take over everything. The reason software took over everything is because the risk of technical failure was really, really low. Whereas before that, it was things like cars and spaceships and towers. So there was a risk you just wouldn't be able to build it, right? And then there was a risk you wouldn't be able to market it. Whereas with software, there's really no risk that you can't build it. But the huge risk is going to be on the marketing side. And that's when venture capital just kind of took off. And now software rules the world. So some other examples of risk nuggets are, and you use poker, the example of being all in. So here's if you don't know, the absolute best hand you can have in poker is 2 aces to start in Texas Hold'em poker. You are the odds-on favorite against any other 2 hands. So if it's you and one other person, and you've got pocket aces, right? And let's say even the other person doesn't have the same hand, and all the money you have in the world is $1 million. Should you bet $1 million on that hand, right?
No.
And the answer is no, right? Even though you've got the best hand possible, even if you have a business idea that you think, I've calculated all the risks, this thing's got a 90% chance of success, right? You still don't bet everything you have, because being out of the game is much worse than just failing once. So, when you get to the point where, most of your activity is investing, like ours, the rule of thumb is don't invest more than 5% of your net worth in any given project. When you're younger and you're just starting out, it's higher. I mean, you want to take bigger risks. And also, before you declare bankruptcy, before you have a family and kids and a lot of obligations, you can afford to take bigger risks, right? But the best poker players in tournaments, if they get aces on their first hand, I've seen them throw it away because there's 8 other players who come into the hand, and somebody goes all in. And you just don't want to take that risk on the first day of the tournament. You want to wait long enough that luck gets weeded out and skill starts to come in. And with entrepreneurship, I mean, one of the best quotes on entrepreneurship I ever heard was from Vinod Khosla from Sun Ventures. And he said, entrepreneurship is a matter of staying alive long enough to get lucky.
Yeah, I've heard that same thing said in many different ways, right? And so I think it's an important part of risk is how much to risk, how much of your capital.
Right.
And it's almost never 100%.
Yeah.
I actually don't think it should ever be 100% because then you're out of the game.
Yeah, and you also shouldn't borrow to invest, right? Investing should be done with money that you've saved, right? I mean, that's not entirely true. I mean, you get investors, right? You can borrow on credit cards, some limited amount, right? But not past your ability to service that debt.
Yeah, very, very important things to keep in mind. Risk mitigation and staying in the game.
Yeah. Also, just on the staying in the game part, one of the reasons is, like I say, with the aces, it's like you can do everything right. You can do absolutely everything right, and the odds are in your favor at every single stage, and you can still fail because of market conditions, or a terrorist attack, or or a tsunami in Japan. At one point I was going to, or tariffs. That's right. Who knows what's going to happen? So you can do everything right. And, it's with my business failures, especially, there's been this constant stream of, I've had 3 big business successes, 6 big business failures. And with every failure, it was like, God, Jesus, what could I have done better? And you always learn something. It's worth doing the postmortem. I remember when I look back at the Velo with the image stitching software, one of the questions I asked the founder when I invested in the business was, what could go wrong? And she said, nothing. This is a sure thing. And I was too inexperienced at that point to push back and say, that's ridiculous. Yeah. If you haven't thought about the failure scenarios, then we have a problem. I need to know the details of what could cause this to go wrong. So yeah, if you think something's a sure thing, please connect with me. I'll tell you all the reasons why it's not a sure thing. Yeah.
So actually, that's another really great question to ask yourself before taking a big risk. And as a risk mitigation tool, not necessarily as a way to talk yourself out of it, but as what could go wrong.
Right.
And then
what could go wrong? What's the likelihood of these things? And you might find out that, oh my God, there's way more. And there's also the conventional wisdom of, once you've done your business plan, cut your revenue in half and double your expenses and see if you still make money. And you never do, right? So, but it'll give you an idea, right, of what could go wrong. So, I mean, when I started audiobooks, suddenly, just after we did the business plan, the Canadian dollar rose dramatically and became parity with the American dollar. So all of our expenses were Canadian dollar salaries, and all of our revenue was American subscriptions. And the numbers changed by 40%, and it happened in a matter of months. So we had to get super efficient, super quick. But I mean, who the hell sees something like that coming, right? It's like tariffs.
Yeah. That's a great example, right, of something that you wouldn't have thought to ask yourself. It wouldn't be anywhere in your plans,
right?
But yeah, you can do everything right. Luckily, you managed to navigate through that.
We navigated through that. Yeah.
So, okay, I can't remember. I'm sure you've written articles on this, but what are, you've taken some risks that have worked out and you've taken some risks that have not worked out. Are there any key lessons do you have an article on this? I feel like you do.
On risks that have worked out and risks that haven't. I mean,
lessons learned.
Dude, every article is about lessons that I've learned.
Well, I think
but I think I wrote an article on heuristics for taking risks.
Oh yeah.
Right. So it's things and here I'm talking with two of our colleagues here, our cat people, and I think the article had a picture of a cat and why it's dangerous to date somebody who has a cat. But there were 5 useful heuristics there about little points that you can take away, things you can look at that'll give you an idea of whether something's going to work or not, right? And so we'll post a link to the article in here, and people can take a look at that.
Okay, should we move on to the next question?
Sure.
Okay, so Amita from Massachusetts puts it well. How do you know it's time to take a risk? It feels stupid and scary to leave safe harbor and take a risk. How do I go about it?
Wow, that's a good one. So unfortunately, in my case, I'm going to ask you to answer this one in a second, because in my case, my risk profile is off the charts. And so as soon as I became unhappy in my job, each time I decided I'm just going to go off and leave my job, leave my comfortable salary, and go to take a risk. And my parents, my wife, my friends were always like, "What are you doing?" When I started audiobooks.com, I quit a $250,000 a year sales job at Cisco to go start this company, and it was like, what the hell are you doing? But I haven't worked out, right? So I mean, so how do you decide? You're a little bit more risk averse than I am.
Yeah, so I was thinking about that as we're talking about risk. I am less tolerant to take certain kinds of risks.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's true, but I think it's actually very similar. How do I know when it's time to take a risk? When something doesn't feel right. Right. Well, I guess there's 2 things. One is the negative, where I'm not happy with a certain aspect of my life, so it's time to change. And any change, even though it may feel safe. See, the problem with humans is we don't care about pain all the time. If it's comfortable pain, we'll stay.
Right. We care about comfort. We don't care about pain.
Yeah. And comfort being familiarity.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to kind of recognize that and not just get comfortable with the familiar, and recognize whether you're actually happy or unhappy.
Yeah. I think if you wake up every day and with discomfort, right? Especially lack of energy. So your body is telling you something, right? If you are starting to feel lethargic, don't feel like doing something, then you've got to change something, right? And quite often that's, it's changing something in your environment. Sometimes it's a relationship, sometimes it's a job, sometimes it's the city, right? And changing these things is huge risk. But here's a valuable heuristic that I've learned, right? Is that if you're committed to something, if you're in something, and all of these are, if you're living in a city, if you're in a job, if you're in a relationship, and you can't decide, am I in or am I out, right? If it feels like 50-50 to you, then guaranteed you're way past the point where an objective person would have pulled the trigger and quit.
That is a great heuristic. I know we've talked a lot about it in terms of firing people and firing employees. If you're not sure, it's probably time to fire them.
Yeah.
And I think that pretty much applies to most parts of our lives, right? If you're not sure, it's probably time to change.
Yeah. My heuristic now on that is the moment it occurs to me that I might have to fire this person, that's the time to have the conversation. And sometimes it's happened that somebody's got a good explanation for what they've done, or I'm able to convince myself that I shouldn't do it. But most of the time, as soon as you think, should I quit this job? Maybe I just need to fire this person. That's when you need to start digging deep into that hole and getting answers.
And obviously everyone's a little different in terms of how much excitement that they need in their lives. And I think maybe that's where you and I differ a little bit in terms of our risk profiles. But I think it's important for everybody, like life needs to have motion. And I think, as soon as you get into a routine for too long, there's some risks. There are some risks attached to doing that too, right? There's the risk of non-action, which I think is really important. How do you deal with fear and self-doubt?
Well, I don't know, meditation, therapy. I've been seeing a therapist for 25 years, pretty much continuously. So, if I was to talk as much as I want to talk to other people about my fear and self-doubt, I would have no friends, right? That's why I need a therapist. So, how I deal with it is talking about it, right? And there's no such thing as somebody who doesn't feel fear. Right? It's what bravery is feeling the fear and then doing it anyway, right? The fear is telling you, sometimes you feel something that's fear or feels like fear. And it's not, it's just excitement, right? And you can get scared away from that, right? We are terrible as humans at determining what our feelings actually mean. All it is a feeling, right? It's like a soundtrack to your life. Whether it means something or not, that's a very different process from feeling the surge of whatever that thing is that's occurring in your life.
I know we're talking about risk, but let's talk about this a little bit, because I think this is an important topic, right? Because I think, it's attached to risk, right? Because why do people not take risks? Because there's fear.
Because they're afraid, right?
Exactly. And so I think, but what you're talking about is sometimes we identify too much with those emotions that we're feeling, and we give them a lot of meaning, and then they often stop us from taking the correct action.
Right. So here's something that I'm hoping will help everybody. Okay. I've taken two of the biggest risks you can take in life. One is getting divorced, and the second being going bankrupt. And what I can tell you from having spoken to many, many people who are on the precipice of those decisions, is that it feels like a void, a black hole opening up in front of you, and you're just going to disappear into that. You can't possibly make that decision because this void is going to swallow you. And what I can tell you is there's light on the other side of the void. And one of the happiest times of my life was just after I declared bankruptcy the first time, the only time, just after my personal bankruptcy 30 years ago, where there was 6 months of recovery. I was depressed. I was living at home. I was fortunate to have support from friends and family, but it's unlikely. I mean, if you're watching this, if you've got a YouTube account you're on, it's unlikely that you're in a position where you're going to be destitute if you take a big risk. Fall back on the support that you have. There is light on the other side. It's, don't take stupid risks. Don't bet everything on something that's like a 50-50 chance. But there's light on the other side. So How do you know when you're taking too much risk? Well, there's no such thing, because you will be fine, right? You'll learn a ton. You'll come out of it on the other side. You'll get up. You'll shake yourself off. I had two massive failures before I had any kind of success, and the failures continue. It's easy to think that I've somehow learned something, and I mean, I've learned something over the years. I make different mistakes every time now, but oh my God, I still make. There's so many fields of endeavor to make mistakes in that I'm just going to keep on making them until the end of my life.
I think there's an unlimited way to make mistakes.
There's an unlimited, absolutely. If you want to be a success in life, make your goal making as many mistakes as possible. That's a good one. Okay.
So actually, well, let's talk about this next, because it kind of leads into our next question. I mean, you've been very open about that, all the times you've messed up, and that you don't really regret having gone through those challenges. So I think a thing that people struggle with is, after they've messed up, how to deal with it. So here, Arik from Denver asks, after taking a big risk that doesn't pan out, what's your personal approach to have the courage to keep taking risks? So I guess answer your personal approach, but also, I guess, how do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, my personal approach is, every time I had one of those big failures, I swore I would never do it again. I am never starting a business again. I'm never quitting a Fortune 500 job again. I'm not, and what happened every time was, about 2 years later, it was like, I don't like this job, right? It's like, maybe I've learned enough. I mean, at one point I said, I'm never running a company again. And I was running a company that was actually, I was the largest shareholder and an executive at a company that sorely needed to have its leadership changed. And I didn't want to do it. And I had friends of mine come in and say, buddy, it's time. Like, you've learned your lesson. You need to take this over now. And that worked out. And that company was audiobooks. But how do other people? I saw actually somebody had put up a question in the chat here about, how do you rebuild your self-esteem from that point? And I don't have an easy answer for that, other than to say your self-esteem shouldn't suffer from failure. People in the States do a much better job of celebrating failure than we do in Canada, and probably a lot of other countries as well. But there's nothing to be ashamed of. It's the thing to be ashamed of, maybe, is if you've got a dream and you don't take steps to go after that dream, you're going to regret what you didn't do way more than you're going to regret what you did do.
Yeah, hugely important point. The other thing I was thinking about, you mentioned earlier, after your first and only bankruptcy, you had a lot of support. So, is that another way that we can sort of, I don't know, bolster ourselves to take a risk? Like by really creating that support, maybe ahead of time, and knowing that you've got friends and family that are there to back you up emotionally, if not financially. Like, are there other things we can do to make taking risks easier?
Yeah, I mean, having the support of key people in your life is really important. I mean, if you're in a relationship, having the support of your partner is like, that shouldn't even be a question, right? First of all, you should have a partner that supports you in key things that you want to do. But if the person who loves you the most is against the idea, then you need to take a hard look at it. I'm not saying that you should always listen to them, because I'll say something. My parents love me to death and they want the best for me, but they have been wrong on so many of the major decisions of my life, because the world they grew up in isn't the world I grew up in, right? So you said it earlier. It's like, understand who is giving you the information, understand who you're asking, right? And what their filters and biases are as you take in that information.
It's very important. Just want to remind everyone, we're going to be taking some live questions at the end, so do put your questions in the chat.
We have lots of great questions in here. I can see them.
All right,
now.
Good. Well, good questions are always fun to answer. Well, let me just get through some of these here. Okay, so Sanjay, one of the things that you and I have talked a lot about is how to lead a meaningful and fulfilling life. So Neil from Toronto asks, you made all the money you would need for the rest of your life. Why risk losing it with new ventures? Why not sit back and enjoy the fruits of your labor?
Neil, where were you 5 years ago when I needed you asking me this question? Okay. Okay. For a little while, I actually thought that I was the only idiot in the world who's ever done this. But after I sold my company and made a lot of money, I've lost, I think, I've lost $20 million over the course of the last 4 years since 2021 through ill-fated, like there was an investment in a psychedelic stock called a Thai. There was getting into the cannabis business. There was 2 restaurants, and then COVID and, industry changes after that. So why did I take those risks? Why did I invest $5 million US in one stock? Because I thought it was a sure thing, right? So I am here to tell you the lessons I'm giving you aren't things I've known my whole life. I haven't gotten what I consider a successful life or wealth because I knew these things before. I got lucky in spite of myself. And now I'm passing on some of the lessons I've got from more recent dumb decisions that I've made or things that I've had to learn. So Neil, the answer is there's no reason to keep on taking those risks. What I should have done is my risks used to be about $100,000 risks, and I would take one and lose, and I take another one, and I lose, and I take another one, and then it blew up, right? So what I should have done, just for the fun of it, after I made that money, was just keep on taking $100,000 risks, right? Maybe have another one that blows up, maybe that doesn't. Hey, it's something to do. But instead, what I did is I started taking $1 million risks, right? And multi-million-dollar risks, right? And then when those blew up, it wasn't good. So I went through an incredibly stressful time a couple of years ago, not because I had devastated my fortune, but because the trajectory looked so bad, and also the self-esteem was hitting me. It's like, shit, I thought I knew what I was doing. Like, what the hell's happening? What's happening? Like, every one of these risks was well thought out, planned out. I had good people around me. I wasn't going to run out of cash, but it failed anyway. And that's the lesson. That's the lesson. You can do everything right and fail anyway for broader reasons. So right now you've got inflation and tariffs. Back then you had COVID. After COVID, you had seismic changes in a whole bunch of different industries, supply chain challenges everywhere. So you can do everything right and still fail. So the important thing is to do the assessment, figure out what could I have done differently, what do I learn from this process, and pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and get on with it.
Let's dig into that a little bit. Okay, so what would you have done different? Like so you rewind the clock 4 or 5 years. Mm-hmm. You get the opportunity to invest in a Thai, the restaurants, all these things. Would you have made? Are you saying you would have made smaller investments, or you would not have done them at all? Now, you don't know, like, obviously we know in hindsight they didn't work out.
Right. No, so the systematic things, the things that I learned, first of all, no more than 5% of your net worth in any given investment, right?
We both learned that lesson in the last few years. Yeah, that's a very important lesson, guys.
Cut that. That would have cut down my investment in a Thai a little bit. What other lessons have I learned? There is one about, I've had I'm not even going to call it misfortune. I've had some business partners that have been challenging to work with. Lawsuits that have happened, that kind of thing. And I'd love to think that I was unusual in that regard, but I'm going to tell you now, if you have a partner in your business, it's probably 50-50. Given that I've invested in 100 businesses over the course of the last 10 years, I can tell you the chances of a partnership meltdown are much, much higher than you might think, right? They're about the same as, come to think of it, as a divorce, right? Marital. So, and when I invest in a business, I know there's a question out there about how to know when to invest, but one of the questions is how solid is the partnership, and really, you're probably not going to know the answer to that unless the people have worked together before or have worked together for a long time, and then you've got some kind of track record to go on. But the lesson to take away is until you know somebody quite well, I would say limit the amount of trust or investment that you put into that relationship. And so I would say, and this is true in life in general, friends you make quickly, you're going to lose quickly. It's one of the things my parents told me that actually turned out to be correct. But as you get to know somebody, if you meet somebody new and they seem, like really competent and they know what they're talking about, they have an idea, and you think, wow, this is great. I love this person. This is going to be great. And you just met them. That is not the time to write $1 million check, or if what you have is $10,000, not the time to write a $10,000 check. until you know somebody, until you know their track record, until you know they're trustworthy. And it takes 5 years. I think it takes 5 years to know if somebody is trustworthy. Right? It takes that long for enough bad things to happen in a relationship for you to get a sense of this is how they handle downturns in a relationship.
Yeah, very important. That's actually really important advice. Partnerships. I think getting into a partnership is a lot like falling in love. At the beginning, everything is great.
Yeah, all you know is the strengths.
Yeah,
right. All you know is the strengths. I'm going to pass on a little bit of career advice here. Okay.
Yeah.
It's like if you want to rise rapidly in your career, you have to jump from company to company. Okay. And I feel bad saying this because as an employer, I don't want my staff to jump from company to company. But what'll happen is when you're applying at a new company, all they know is your strengths, right? They don't know any of your weaknesses. But your current company knows your strengths and weaknesses. And so they're going to evaluate you that way. Your annual reviews, your raises will be based on strengths and weaknesses. A really good employer will take that into account and will make sure that they promote from within instead of hiring from outside. But that's maybe 20% of employers. So most of the time you're going to find jump. That's the way to get ahead. But that's the reason, because new people only know your strengths.
The same does not apply in relationships, right?
How do you mean?
You shouldn't be jumping every few years to new relationships.
You definitely should not be jumping every few years from relationship to relationship. Fix the problems in your own relationships, people.
Yeah, there's a lot to grow. Okay, so just sort of finishing up on this topic of, sort of how to live a fulfilling life once you have money. Any comments? Last comments on that one?
So a mistake that I see people making over and over again is to value their career and their business over their relationships. And I find it heartbreaking when I see somebody cancel a casual friend lunch because something suddenly came up in business. I mean, it's not that something can't come up that's genuinely more important, but you see people, and everybody out there knows people like this, and hopefully you're not people like this, where it's like anything to do with business is more important than anything to do with personal, because, and the thought is, I'll make my money, I'll make my mark on the world, and then everybody wants to be my friend, right? And I can tell you right now, those people are not the friends you want to have. The friends you want to make are the friends now. I would say focus on friends, relationships, partners, family, if you're so inclined. Focus on that initially, and they will support you through all of the ups and downs of your life, right? So how could you not make that the priority? Because otherwise you're going to fail in business, and then you'll be sitting there, by yourself, sobbing and wondering what the hell went wrong. You want to build up your self-esteem. You want to maintain your sense of self-worth. Surround yourself with great people who support you.
Yeah, or you're going to succeed in business and have a lot of money and be surrounded by people that
only value you for that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Which neither one of those is really great.
Oh, and a little corollary to that, and this applies to personal relationships as well as business, is the best way to surround yourself with great people is to be a great people, right? So you should find the people that you like, connect with, and be very supportive to them, right? The best way to be liked is to like other people and to show that.
Awesome. Okay, should we go to some live questions?
Let's do it. What do you got?
Okay, so you know what? I can't actually see the chat from here, but do you want to pick one?
Oh, there's a whole bunch here.
Okay, Pearl's sending us some questions.
Do you want to get that? Okay.
Oh, here's a great. Okay, I have to ask you this one, Sanjay. How are you so awesome?
I don't know. Good genes, good tailor, good friends. Good friends. That's it.
Good friends. There you go.
Thank you for that question.
Okay. How do you keep steady with mental health struggles in a way where you are being productive and taking care of yourself?
Well, I got to say, it took me a while to admit that I had issues with my moods, right, going up and down. Eventually got diagnosed with bipolar. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder 5 years before I accepted the diagnosis and started taking the medicine for it.
Wow.
So, in our community, I suppose in many communities, right, mental health, especially talking about it, admitting it, it's taboo. Fortunately, that's changing. So for me, starting to take lamotrigine for depressive skewed bipolar disorder, phenomenal decision. It changed my life. And then got into therapy. And even now, like fortunately we've got other terms now like life coach and business coach. I think everybody can benefit from a life coach or business coach, and these kinds of services are available at widely differing price levels, but everybody can benefit from it. And if you can't afford it or you don't think it's ready, then develop what's called a kitchen cabinet, which is friends that you can sit around the kitchen with and talk about your ideas, right? Especially people who disagree with you.
Hard to find those sometimes, but really important.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, hard to find people that disagree with you in a positive
way. Constructive way. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Okay. Eileen asks, what are red flags in a new business partner?
Okay. So, biggest one is lying, right? And if you catch them in a little lie, an exaggeration, something, odds are there's a lot more. It's the iceberg thing being underneath the surface. Yeah. Also, I've had instances where, when you do reference checks, this is a really valuable one that I learned the hard way. When you do reference checks, anything other than a stellar, glowing reference is a red flag, because especially if the person gave you the reference themselves. But if you are looking into somebody's background, it's so easy to do it now with LinkedIn. If you're looking into somebody's background by just asking around about them, and what you get is lukewarm, right? If I know somebody who's awesome, I will not damp down my language at all in talking about how awesome they are and how you have to hire them. So if you get somebody who says, yeah, they're pretty good, right? They might be able to do the job, right? I think, if you manage them properly, right? Those are all red flag signals. So ask around. Everybody's got a reputation, right? If you can't find a reputation for somebody, if nobody admits to knowing them, that's also a red flag, right?
I have a yellow flag that I'm going to throw out there.
Okay.
Charismatic people. Not saying that they're bad. Just be a little extra careful with them.
Can we expand that a little bit? Just say good-looking people, right?
Well, it's not. Good-looking can be part of charisma, but I've noticed that some very charismatic people have a tendency to exaggerate, and it's easy to buy into what they're telling.
Absolutely, people who've got the gift of gab, who can entrance you with a good story, right? Sometimes that's such a valuable skill that maybe that will make them successful, right? But you're right. The people I know, the worst business partners I've had were very charismatic people.
Yeah. Okay, so Pranay asks, we love this topic. With AI changing how we do work, how should startups think about getting started?
Well, the number of uses, application cases for AI in business formulation is astounding. As soon as you ask ChatGPT a question like, I'm thinking about starting business X, it's going to immediately spit back, well, have you thought about this, and this? Would you like help formulating a business plan? Would you like help putting together a list of people that you should talk to? Like it will take the lead. So let it, right? So I would say on the idea of structuring your idea and digging into the variables of it, AI is invaluable. But then you get into the coding part of it, everything's software. And I personally haven't used AI for coding. I use it for image generation, for ideas when I'm writing sometimes. But my understanding is if you want to create a website that, that mimics Instagram, you can tap into ChatGPT, give me the source code for a website that mimics Instagram, and it will just do it.
There's some great sites for that. Yeah. Replit, like you can make an app just by talking to it. You don't need to know how to code it anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So so AI is wonderful. That please get a paid GPT account if you can afford it, and start leveraging it.
Okay, Rishabh asks, risk-taking drives entrepreneurship, but when you're investing, how do you evaluate a founder's appetite for risk differently?
Oh, that's a good question. Obviously you want a founder who is willing to take a risk. Generally, as an investor, by the time you've come across an entrepreneur, they're going to already have committed a lot to a business. I suppose, the best way to evaluate a business is by who else is investing. And so, for example, if you find somebody who's investing and they have no family members on their investment list, that's what's called the cap table, right? The absolute number one question I ask anytime I invest in a business is, who else is on your cap table? Because you want to make sure that people who've known the person for a long time are on there. You want to make sure that people who know them well And you want to make sure that there's people on there who will help them succeed, especially other investors, brand name investors, who will help them raise capital somewhere down the road. So that's not what you think of the founder, their risk appetite, their charisma, their ability to put together a business plan. None of that, all of that pales compared to the information you're going to get from the cap table.
Actually, that's a really, really good point. It's hard to overstate that.
Yeah.
Okay, so from Jimmy, I have my own media marketing business. What's one thing you wish you knew earlier when building your business and growing personally?
I mean, if I'm going to go way back, it's always been the importance of promotion and marketing, right? Like I got my business degree and thought I had learned. I knew so much about marketing strategy. I thought I knew it and I could get out there. An MBA teaches you dick all about genuine on the street marketing, how to do an email campaign, how to send flyers out, how to do PR. None of that is actually covered in even the best MBA programs. So those are the things I wish I knew. I wish I understood street level how to do the kind of marketing probably that Jimmy's very good at, right?
What about personally? Do you think so it's hard to go back, rewind when you're starting? I guess what's one thing that you wish you kind of knew personally that would have helped you grow?
I mean, hell, I can tell you the specific thing that killed my video business, which was I thought that a good response rate on a mail campaign, like a physical mail campaign, was 10%, right? It turns out it was 1.5%. So know your numbers. And this is what's great about AI is you can ask. And by the way, the reason I thought it was 10% is because a consultant in the business who I wasn't paying, so I got what I paid for, a consultant in marketing told me that if a well-constructed mail marketing campaign would get me a 10% return. And that's just complete fucking bullshit. And that guy turned out to be one of these charismatic jackasses. So I would say, as you figure out what your critical numbers are, right? There's so much data out there on the internet right now. Here's another example of something I learned was U.S. public companies have to file something called a form, I think it's a 10K, right? And what that does is it's more detailed than their annual report, and it discloses all of the risks in their business. So if you can find a public company that does anything remotely like what the company you wanted to start is doing, if you look at their 10K, you will gather so much information. I mean, I remember when I looked at Audible's 10K when I was starting the audiobook business, it was like, oh my God, I can't believe they're telling me this information. Oh my God, this is like great. I could build out half my business plan. It was amazing.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Well, I like this question. Let's talk about the difference between an adrenaline, like in risk, right? There's the adrenaline rush from a risk, but then there's also sort of this steady fulfillment. So Monty asked this, how do you view the relationship between an adrenaline rush versus steady fulfillment?
Wow. I mean, I think what you want in life is a little bit of both, right? So, and if you look at it, like steady fulfillment comes from, a meaningful career, good relationships, right? But you're not going to get an adrenaline rush from those things, right? Bungee jumping or a music festival, I guess, give you the adrenaline rush. So I would say you have to have a little bit of both, but don't ever confuse a continuous adrenaline rush with happiness, right? It's going to result in a crash at some point. You need to have those sources of low level, let's call them dopamine hits, right? So reading or watching TV or talking with friends as opposed to doom scrolling or playing video games.
Yeah, I think it's important to know where you're getting what kind of enjoyment, right? And so if you're trying to get your adrenaline rush from your business, that could probably lead to some problems.
Yeah. Sorry, I just put that into my own context here of what an adrenaline rush from business looks like. I mean, there's times. So I did this one time. We did an ad campaign for audiobooks where we showed pictures. It was George Bush Jr. at the time who was president, and we showed the billboard campaign idea was a big picture of George Bush looking confused, and the caption was, "Want to read more? Listen to the audiobooks," right? And the moment before I called the billboard company and said, "Okay, make it live," that was, I don't know if you call it an adrenaline rush. There was a rush of something right? And make it live. It was a huge success, huge success. And I mean, I got one death threat, but two different news channels wanted to cover the ad campaign, and it was successful because of the news coverage, not because of the billboards themselves. But yeah, you probably shouldn't be searching for that kind of thing.
Okay, last question before we're going to have to wrap up. T.chat asked, what's the biggest problem you see at any level? Firm-wide, citywide, worldwide?
The biggest problem I see.
You can riff on anything you like.
Jesus. Okay. So, there's a great answer to this. Okay. Which is that the problems that cause the most problems are ones that you don't see coming. Okay. So the stuff that we see coming, which is AI dominating humans, climate change, tariffs, these are not the problems that are going to cause us issues. Humans are fantastically adaptable, clever creatures. And when we get together, we can accomplish anything. Okay. And so, you're starting to see the world come together on climate change. You're seeing safety standards being developed for AI. And, never say never. Who knows what's going to happen? But the things I worry about aren't the things that are in the news. I'm constantly scanning the horizon to see what are the risks that we don't see. I mean, even though there was movies, about plagues overtaking the world,
Right.
nobody seriously thought something like COVID was going to happen.
I didn't even think it was going to happen when it was happening.
Yeah. So it can't get worse. No, surely it can't get worse now. But yeah, so this is the lesson. Okay, some things never change, but the risks, the things that are going to kill you, aren't the things that you're worried about. Also, on this front, on the subject of AI, right? I heard Morgan Housel, and if you've never read anything by Morgan Housel, his book Psychology of Money is the best book on money you'll ever read. So please read that, or you can read my article about it. But here's the thing: the optimists, when automobiles, airplanes, electricity, internet, computers, mobile phones, when all of these things came out, the optimists, the people who said this is going to change the world, they were wrong by a factor of 100. Those things became much, much bigger than anybody thought. And so right now we're kind of thinking AI is going to get into everything, right? AI is going to take over certain industries, right? You have no idea. It's going to change everything. When we look back on this, even 20 years from now, it's going to be, holy shit, we had no idea, right? If you don't understand AI now, if you don't have some familiarity with the tools or understand what's going on, you better get on it right now. Because AI is not going to take your job, but humans using AI are going to take your job for sure. And it's going to happen very soon.
All right. I think we need to wrap up this one.
Was that scary enough? Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. So I guess we'll wrap it up. Thanks everybody for coming out. This was a risk doing this. It was technical risk, but we have great producers on this, and it was a lot of fun. Right. So
yeah. Nice job.
Thank you. Thanks
everyone
for participating. Thanks for all the great questions. We didn't answer half the questions. So we will certainly take a look at doing this again in the future. It's been a fantastic experience. I think we're at our mark. Is there anything else, producers, that you want to tell us? What's coming up here? Right? So inspiring. Yes, I thank you. You guys are inspiring. Okay. Yeah, please sign up for my newsletter at sanjaysays.co. Follow me on Instagram, wherever. Say hello if you come to the streets. Please come and have a drink at my restaurant. Coffee Oyster Champagne and Runway 06. So thanks, guys. We'll catch you on the flip side. Okay.
All right. I think you have to
end stream.
Bye.